I always turn it down a little bit on you because you're louder.
Shocker.
Jeff's the quietest.
He is.
He is, man. And sometimes mumbles.
I don't mumble.
Hey, we're going to do a new series.
Are we?
Yeah, we are, for the summer. I wanted to call it Summer on the Mount, and you all poo-pooed it.
Yeah. I also don't know what we're doing here today at all.
We're going to cut that, Nathan.
No.
We got to stop. We have to stop admitting that we don't know those things.
I do. I know what we're doing.
Okay.
We're giving an
Remember,
overview.
we said we don't want to let the audience
Yeah,
know
no,
that we
no,
don't
I'm saying
study.
I personally,
Yeah, I know.
I personally don't know. I thought we were coming just to kind of give a little teaser, and you guys both showed up with
Notes.
like robust notes ready to go. And I'm
These
going,
are my notes from the mulligan. Does that make you feel better?
oh, there's a mulligan.
Oh. Yeah.
Spoiler.
We had a mulligan from before the season started.
Yeah. Oh, well, was it a mulligan or was it there was way more in this than we thought there would be to talk
You know
about. So
what?
let's just make it a whole season.
That's actually true. I just think we
It was a mulligan.
No, we had some good insights
But it
on
wasn't
that
that we weren't prepared. It was almost that it was we just tried to cover too much.
Yeah.
And we realized how rich
Yeah.
it was and how good it was going to be. And we didn't want to try to cram it all in.
That's true.
one. Yeah, but I didn't bring any of those notes with me today, and y'all apparently,
Yes.
So here we are.
Here we are. And today is really just a quote unquote teaser episode about the whole Sermon on the Mount. We'll kind of dive into the Beatitudes starting soon. But what we want to do today is just kind of give a big snapshot. Actually, why did we decide? Let's give some insight into, why we decided to do Sermon on the Mount, and then it kind of will transition into what it is. So what were we thinking?
Well, we were thinking that we were tired of just giving our opinions
Yeah,
about things,
yeah.
and we really wanted to get back to a prolonged biblical text, that we could kind of talk through.
Yeah, because we kind of spent the spring in culture stuff, and I feel like we did a good job of
Yeah.
applying scripture to it.
For sure.
But we had to go looking for scripture to apply to it versus working our way through a text, like you were just
Yeah.
saying. So
Yeah, and I think, we talk about we're a faith and culture podcast, and but we want to start first with the faith part. We want to start with the scripture part. And then obviously there's some ways to contextualize it with where we are. And Sermon on the Mount
Yeah.
is a fantastic place for that to be.
Yeah, it really is, because Jesus was definitely talking to the people who were listening to him, which were both highly educated Pharisees who knew everything there was to know about Scripture to that point,
Yeah.
and some people who were just sort of looky-loos and who were like, who is this guy and what is he talking about? And maybe some people who weren't as committed in their faith, but they also weren't opposed to it. And he's just spilling this information to everyone, and that's valuable.
yeah, well, and they may not have any faith. They're just there because he can heal them, he can meet their needs, that sort of thing. So it's interesting when you start in the Beatitudes. It's like, blessed are the poor in spirit, the whatever. But then you go back a few verses, and it's like, these are the people that he's been doing ministry to and for a while, and that's who he's talking to, in addition to all those people that you just said. So
Yeah.
I think when we were talking on that last episode, that's when we started pulling back all those layers. Like, wow, there's more here. Even though we've studied, there's more here than we even saw before we all got here together.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to doing over the summer.
Yeah, and I think, we'll continue to build context. Like, we can't give every piece of context, but one of the things I really did appreciate about the Mulligan episode was setting the context of when this was, and there's some debate around that, and as well as who was in the audience. Because, in chapter 4, what you have is like the final recruitment of his disciple. Well, actually, no, that's even in debate, because I
It's
think
the
we were
start of,
wondering
yeah.
when Matthew was recruited. Like,
Yeah.
Matthew might have been recruited after this,
Yeah.
and then he records it retroactively.
And that's what
or
Luke
he may have
does.
been a guy in the crowd just listening to this teacher. You know what I mean? You
that's
just never
right.
know.
Yeah, in Luke, the way Luke records it is that the disciples are called after
Yeah.
the Sermon on the Mount. So
Yeah, it is interesting. And so just a kind of idea here is that, some have said this is like a compilation of like all of Jesus' teachings. Some say it didn't happen in like hours. It happened over days.
Right.
So what's really cool and unique about this is the writer, Matthew, decided to condense it into these, what we call now 3 chapters, 5, 6, and 7. But really, most importantly, it was at a point in time in Jesus' ministry where he was getting very popular,
Yeah.
obviously by the crowds, because it wasn't like he was like, okay, everybody, I'm having a church service. People noticed him, and people were flocking to him. To Jeff's point about wanting to be healed, or wanting or the Pharisees, to your point, Lori, about wanting to maybe prove him wrong or do more homework so they could eventually
catch him in
punish
something.
Yeah, right. And so, but give a little context, because I think we did that last time, of just who is there. You mentioned the Pharisees, the people who are wanting, but like socioeconomically as well.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Needy people,
Yeah.
sick.
Well, I mean, it's just an everyman crowd.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the neatest things. If you stop for a second when you're reading a passage like this, go, these are real people. And here's
Yeah.
who some of these people were, and that's who Jesus was talking to.
Yeah.
And it really is a piece of scripture that has flesh and bone on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the coolest things.
And I think if we read what comes just before chapter 5, oh gosh, I'm sorry. I'm going to be reading it in the NASB. I'm sorry.
Jeff,
I didn't
we are gonna get her a
print
gift.
out.
We're
We're going to
The
go to Amazon it
ESV.
today.
Okay.
And it's going to be her round
Are there any
table
supply
Bible.
chain issues with the ESV Bibles or anything?
Sorry for the NASB reading, but
It's a well-used
before-
NASB.
It
That's
is,
word.
Good
look.
for you.
Let the listener
Anyway.
understand.
It says, and Jesus was going about in all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the more religious people, and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness among the people. So that gives some context of the everyman.
What's building, yeah.
And the news about him went out in all of Syria, and they brought to him all who were ill and taken with diseases, and a great multitude followed him.
There you go.
So,
There you go.
you kind of get a sense of it's just what you said. It's everybody. And I think it's really cool to think about the fact that Jesus really was this emerging leader at this point. Didn't really know who he was necessarily yet, but he was this emerging leader. There is hope that maybe he is the one.
He's the Messiah we've been waiting for.
Yeah. And so you have to think about
Which
the
they would have translated into, here's the guy who's going to topple the government for
That's
us.
100% where I was going.
Yeah.
That we have to know that a large portion of the audience was thinking this is going to be the earthly king.
That's right.
He's doing
who's
all
gonna-
the stuff that guy's supposed to do.
Yes.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
to hear, not to spoil what's coming next, but to hear blessed are the poor in spirit, you're like, no. That's not how this goes down.
right.
We conquer people.
Well, and I love that's what he starts with, because when I think about the Sermon on the Mount, I think about a list of imperatives and a list of originally. I'm going to correct it in a second. It's a misconception about the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Is these are a bunch of it's like some people would consider it like Jesus ushering the new law,
Right. The new Ten Commandments,
the
so
new
to
Ten
speak.
Commandments, yeah, and there is a lot of parallelism with the Old Testament. I mean, there's a lot of things he's drawing out of the Old Testament, but most importantly here, he's starting with a list of indicatives or things that are kingdom focused that he is ushering in, not from an external religiosity standpoint of do's and don'ts and laws, but of what he's doing and he's about to do. And so I love that, because then when we're about to enter into this series, we're not just going to go through do this, don't do that. It's kingdom perspective. And for those who are of the kingdom, who believe in this King, Jesus, this is the way they ought to live. Not in a religious standpoint, but out of an overflow of who Jesus is.
Yeah, it's who the citizens of this kingdom should be
Yeah.
more than how they should act.
That's right. Yeah, that's really good.
I have a lot of things I want to say, but that's the point of the next several episodes. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut at this
You
point.
can tease it. You
No,
can tease
no,
it.
no.
No, you're not going to do it?
Nope, I don't have my notes.
But you better write it down, because you'll forget it. You're going to forget it.
Dude, no kidding.
Yeah, as we kind of just, there's a lot to look forward to here. What would you say as you kind of reviewed 5 through 7? What is one big thing that sticks out to you about what we're about to discuss, other than what we've already talked about? I'll give you guys time to think about it. I'll give you mine.
Okay.
That's usually what I do. 'Cause
Okay.
I ask the question, I know my answer.
Yeah, because you wrote
And
the
I'll let you-
questions.
yeah, exactly. It was at the end. It's in chapter 7, starting in verse 24, and he says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And then the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house. And it fell, and great was the fall of it. And then last verse there in verse 28. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribe. So a couple things there, just the idea here is for us to hear it, to believe it, to abide in it, to obey it, right, is considered to be a wise man. And again, isn't just the do's and don'ts and walk in a straight line, but being kingdom minded, living out your kingdom privilege. And then if you don't, then you'll live very foolishly. And that was captivating to both sides, wherever you landed. Those who were against Jesus and those who were for Jesus, they recognized, wow, this guy has authority that he's speaking from.
You want to go? You want me to go? Okay.
You go.
I think for me, there's so much of this that is talking about what abundant living really looks like.
Good. Yeah.
And how it's not necessarily what we would expect. And that the way that we're going to have a fulfilling life in an earthly kingdom, because we do live on earth. We cannot,
yeah, that's right.
that's a real thing.
For sure.
So the way that we can have abundant life here on earth is to understand what kingdom living is. And it's the integration of earthly living and kingdom living so that our lives mean something. So that we're not just, walking around anxious all the time, so that we're not just walking around judging people all the time, so that we're not just walking around, kind of putting our morality on everybody all the time. It's the integration of, yes, all of those things are important, but it's the integration of my citizenship here on earth and my citizenship in heaven and how those things come together.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, not too different from either one of y'all, but just the whole thing is counter to what they think he's going to say, counter to who they think he's going to be, counter to what they think he's going to do. So he is ushering in a kingdom, but not the way they think. I mean, there's a whole section of, you've heard it said, but I say to you. It's like he's turning the law on its head. He's not throwing away the law. 5:17 says he didn't come to abolish it, but to fulfill it. So everything about what we're going to do runs counter to common sense, so to speak.
What you
Love
just
that.
said made me realize we're not that original. Like for the last couple of years we've been doing this, we like to we've been doing series about flipping things on its head.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus is the OG when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And if there was ever a passage of scripture for us to cover, this was
Yeah.
it. And I don't really think we had that in mind
Right.
when we chose this. But as you just said that, Jeff, it makes sense.
See what happens when I don't prepare? Dropping nuggets right there, baby.
You did prepare.
It was
Jeff
just
is always
1 month ago.
I think Jeff's trying to always convince us that he doesn't prepare, so that when he says really smart things like that, we're like, wow,
right.
look at that.
Yeah.
He came up with it on the fly. I'm not buying your story anymore, buddy.
That's right. That's right. We know you read your Bible.
I had my quiet time this morning.
Okay, good.
I was in Ezekiel. I had nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Oh, man.
I'm excited about this
Yeah,
series.
I am too.
I
It'll be
love the
good.
Sermon on the Mount.
All right, so make sure you like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and we really appreciate that. And we're looking forward to the summer. Thanks.